Hello, everybody. We are going to be working today on the app build for Unit 2, which is the Question Bot app. And as I was just explaining to the students just before I hit record, this is kind of a two-phase approach, right? So often when you're building an app, you just jump into Xcode and start coding, right? But what they're doing here is they actually have a playground developed where we work out some of the logic and really the rationale of why we're building this and what we're trying to do in the playground. So in essence, what we will be creating in the playground is the logical code that will drive the answers basically for the app. And we're doing that outside of Xcode, even though playgrounds are really Xcode, but outside of that normal programming environment. And then once we have that all completely developed, then we will switch over to the project here and start building it out. And I do have to make sure that I'm in the student folder, not the teacher folder here. So I'm going to go ahead and open up the playground. Second to launch here. I'll pull it over from my other screen. So here comes the playground. And we're here on the first page, so make sure that you guys are in the same spot if you're following along. And let's read through this really quick and kind of get a feel for what we're creating. I mean, basically, we are going to create this app where you can type in a question and then have that question be answered by the app, like a real chatbot. And I always pose this question, like whenever you're interacting with one of these things on a screen. In a lot of companies now, like you go to their websites and you ask for help or to chat with somebody, and really you're chatting with a piece of software, by the way, right? And then if they find a key phrase in what you're asking, then they might send you to a real human being to answer the rest of it. But it's kind of interesting because this is a coded thing. It feels a little bit like it's AI, but it's not. Which then has you start posing questions about AI. Is AI really intelligent, or is it just really well-written software? And I always argue that for the most part, it's really well-written software. It's not necessarily independently intelligent and self-learning for the most part. All right, so let's take a look at this first page here in the playground. It says, you're going to work on a function to create or make the question bot answer questions. You can build the brains of the app in the playground before adding it to the app. This lets you concentrate on the part you're working on right now. And I am a big believer of that sometimes it's really good to separate the logic and the visual components. The brain of the question bot is the function named response to question. All right, and we're going to try out a few different versions of this function. So as we step to the playground, we're going to kind of build it up and try a few different things. So there's a learning process that happens here too. It's not just let's type the code and go, right? And it's a little bit of a flow to it. All right, so we start with the function basically pre-built here, right? So it says func response to, and then we have question string with an output of a string. So we are going to feed in something that's typed in, and then the output is going to be a string. And that makes sense. And then for right now, this is set up to just return, sorry, what was that? Like, I didn't understand, right? But hey, you got to start somewhere, right? Okay, now we can ask questions and then look at the answers in the sidebar. So the first one, we just feed in, how are you? Sorry, right? So you get the carte blanche answer here of sorry, what was that? And how are you? Same thing, of course, because the function is set up to just return the one thing. Okay, and it points out, okay, it doesn't make for a great conversation. This function gives the same answer, whatever the question, but we can change that. Now, if you want to test this, and it's not a bad idea to just kind of get the juices flowing here, and we can type something in and say, hey, what's up? That type of thing. and then it should say the same response. So I would suggest that you at least try something like that just to make sure it's responding to you and to make sure that your playground is active. I think that that's just a wise decision. I'm going to move on to the next page here. Now, the first part of this is, and this is where you have to do a little conceptual leap here. When you think about you're doing a question bot or a chat bot or whatever, usually you're asking questions or you're describing a situation, you know. Because we're calling this a question bot, the assumption is that we are asking it questions. And if you think about the standard format for a question, what are the words we start with in a question, right? You know, the standard like what, where, why, how, that is a really good example. So let's think about that, right? So in other words, you know, let's look at what they're saying. They're saying in this exercise, you make a function that gives different answers depending on the first word of the question. So they're telling you right up front, we're not really reading the question. We're just looking at like the kind of question they're answering and then coming up with a generic response and result to it. So we're going to develop a function called hasPrefix, and that method will test if a string begins with another string. So for example, if we feed into it this Swift programming as text, then we run the method attached to this called hasPrefix, and we're looking at just the first word, Swift, and then if that is able to be processed, we will basically, you know, return true or false. So what we're really testing here is, do we have the prefix of the word Swift, or do we have the prefix of the word programming? Where is this relative to? Well, the string we're feeding into it. So this one does have a prefix of Swift. This one does not have a prefix of programming, which is why this is true and that one's false. All right. Now, the way that we're putting the syntax together, and I'll have you think about this. We haven't talked about this form of really using what we call dot notation in programming. But when you have something, and it could be a string in this case, right? Or another function or method, and then you say dot, and then another function or method, that's called dot notation, by the way, in programming. We are really doing this process called chaining functions, right? And so in other words, we're gonna do whatever this first part is. Okay, in this case, we're just putting text on the screen, but it could be a different function. And then in this case, we're running a separate function. And normally when a function is part of another function, we call it a method, but you know, that's kind of a terminology thing. It's still a function. And this one will execute in series based upon how we're stringing the commands together. It is possible in programming, by the way, to string multiple functions together to have them do a bunch of different actions in one line of code. The grand takeaway here is we are using a pre-built function in this case that is checking, does the string that we're working with have this prefix that is exactly this, right? And so we've proven here that the first one does have that prefix and the second one doesn't. Now it's saying, amend the function in tests below to respond to different first words. How about adding answers for who, what, why, and how questions? All right, so they give us a little bit of an example. All right, and they're starting out with the word hello. So maybe, you know, we're expecting that the person who's signing into the chatbot, well, maybe their first thing they're going to say is hello, right? So if they say hello, it's already set up to respond to it, right? So if they say hello, we're just going to say, well, why, hello there, right? Right, that's kind of cool. All right, that will be the case. Notice it is all lowercase. Then we have an example of how to put a where question in there, right? So else, if the question has a prefix of where, so like, where is McDonald's, or, you know, something to that effect, then we're going to return the standard response to the north. Whatever the heck that means, that, whatever. They must be Canadian or something, right? And then if it's anything else, they're going to say, well, that really depends. And by the way, that's one of my favorite answers to almost every question. What's the answer to question number 5? Well, that depends. It works very well in many situations. So that else is going to persist. But what we need to do is ramp this up. So we're going to work on this collectively right here, where we're going to add prefixes for all of these questions, which means we're going to have 4 additional else if statements. You guys are seeing where we're going on this. Now, to just show how this is working, before we get into like coding it out and everything, I'm going to kind of rearrange my screen space. I want to maximize this, but not necessarily go full screen. Let's see how it's currently working. So when I say response to question, hello there, it starts with hello. Notice all lowercase, so it gives us a why hello there answer. And then the second one, where should I go on holiday? To the north, okay? And then one that doesn't fit yet, what is the capital of France? That really depends, right? I'm not sure why it depends, but it does. Okay, so let's go ahead and start tweaking this. So what we're going to do is we're going to start adding code kind of in between here. And we are going to start with, well, we're going to close that curly bracket, and then I'm going to say else if question has prefix, and now we're going to type in our string. So since we're given an order up here, let's go with who, or actually we had a question where they asked where, right? And did we respond? Oh yeah, we have a response for where, but we don't have one for who or what, right? So let's do who first. Let's say who. We're going to add our curly bracket here. We want to make sure those are complete. And then we're just going to put in a return statement of like who. All right, we got to come up with some sort of generic snarky answer here, right? It doesn't have to be snarky, but it should be somewhat entertaining and somewhat answering. Who, how about a gateway student? Right? Or if you want to actually put a and you guys see what I'm doing here? I'm answering a question with a question. So that's not good. Nobody likes that. That's not really an answer, right?
Yeah.
Maybe a gateway student. That's still a question. It kind of is, but you know what? I'm going with it. You guys can come up with whatever you want in there. I do think that the author has some standard responses. We may end up copying those. We'll see. Let's test it right away. So I can say response. I spell it right though. Response to. Let's put in a who question, and notice that it is lowercase that I have it set up for. So I'm going to say, who is the president? Okay. And you see the response, maybe a gateway student. All right. All right, so you're kind of getting the point here. So that we're going to keep ramping this up. Let's keep adding stuff to this. So we're going to add here up here, else if question has prefix, and we did who. Now we're going to do what. Add our curly brackets, and then our return. And in this case, got to come up with a, okay, think of an example question like, I don't know, what is the, what is the fastest motorcycle? Something like that. What kind of response do we want to have? A generic response to a what question? Like, what are you doing? What do you think would be a good response here to a what question? You can see I'm struggling to come up with an answer too.
Yeah, same.
What? So like, okay, so let's say like, what is your favorite color? Or what should I do tonight? Your response is what? So I'm gonna say,
Go out for drinks.
yeah. All right, Joe Mart, you said it, so that's gonna go out for drinks. What is the fastest motorcycle? Go out for drinks.
Oh,
Maybe not a good idea.
no.
How about, gosh, I'm really struggling to think of something good here. Um,
A 3-year-old hopped up on sugar on a tricycle bike.
a 3-year-old hopped up on sugar. How about we just leave that?
That one hits a little close to home for me.
Right.
I got a 3-year-old daughter.
Well, I'll tell you what, Joe Martin must do that, but what, let's just roll with this, right? We can change the order. It doesn't matter what it says right now. Let's just keep the flow going.
Yeah.
And let's do the remainder of these right away. So let's just say
Sure.
question has prefix, and the next one would be why. All right, well, I can think of a great response to why. We can say, because we like you. Or how about because you are so darn cool. Might not be true, but hey. Next question is going to be, and one thing about this, I could do a little copy pasting here, but there's kind of also this thing that happens working with IntelliSense and getting that flow. Last one we have to do here is how. We are going to return. So like, how do you, make coffee, so, and I'm going to respond to how very carefully, very carefully and step by step. Almost like that. Now you guys can put in really whatever words you want. So have we covered where, who, what, why, and how? Yeah, we got all 5, right? And then we have our else statement in there. So I'm going to move my else back up so that it sits where Swift likes it to sit, which is here, right? And now we have to go ahead and start dealing with testing it. So let's test this. So I'm going to say response to, we've already got a what, where, what, and who. Now we need a why. Why is it cold outside? Maybe the question you anticipated. And let's do another one. I'm not even looking at the responses yet. I'll look at them after, right, and see if they even make sense. And how do you make coffee? And really, these are all questions, right? All right, so let's look at the responses and did it work? Okay, so sidebar here. It says, hello there. Why, hello there. Where should I go on holiday? To the north. What is the capital of France? A 3-year-old hopped up on sugar? Okay. Not a good answer, maybe.
No.
Who is the president? Maybe a Gateway student. Why is it cold outside? Because you are so darn cool. Okay. How do you make coffee? Very carefully and step by step. Right. The only one that didn't seem to make sense is the 3-year-old one, because it's a what question.
Oh.
So. Okay, let's not worry about that too much. But the one thing that is problematic with this, and you have to recognize this immediately, is, okay, I have the habit when I'm typing, and I don't know if you guys are the same, if I'm starting a new sentence, like, I'm one of those goofy people, when I type a text message, I use correct punctuation and spelling and everything. That's just me, right? Like, very rarely like abbreviate. So I could imagine, like, I might set up the chat bot and type in a capital W for all the question words, right? And a capital H. And they are making the point here, if you do put in a question where you just change that first letter, now we're getting the generic answer rather than getting the correct response. Right? All right, so we're going to deal with that on the next page. So here's how we do that. We could, and this is kind of fascinating. They're first giving you this use case scenario. Let me see if I can like zoom in on this. I'm assuming you guys can see my screen just fine.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I have the temptation to zoom in. I will leave that temptation alone for now. But they're doing this thing here where they're taking a string. And remember, if you have a double equal sign, that doesn't mean that you're assigning it. That means you're checking to see if they're equivalent, right? And what they're doing is lowercase where. Does that equal a lowercase where? Yes, that's true. The moment I add a capital letter, it doesn't. I guess we kind of proved that on the previous page. And clearly, all caps does not equal all lowercase. So we get false on those. And this is what we're trying to solve. Now, one solution, right, would be you could write code where we check all the different versions of it. And in fact, if you start thinking about it, they might type 1 capital letter or 2 capital letters or 3 capital letters, right? It does not make sense to keep repeating your code, nor does it make sense to write a complicated statement like, if question has prefixes where, or question has prefixes where with a capital W, or, right? None of that makes sense to do. You could do it. And I've seen programmers try to do that. And it's like silly, right? This is where we work smarter. So, for example, we can, in a situation like this, where somebody typed in all caps, maybe they hit caps lock on their keyboard or their phone or whatever, and it comes out all caps, we can take that question by this other method called lowercase and convert everything to lowercase and then run it through the chatbot. That way we don't have to change our logic. We're just changing the input, completely transparent to the user. But on the back end, that's happening. All right, like we're changing it to lowercase and then checking it. And then we can ask this, right? The lowercase question, if it has the prefix, and then roll forward with that. All right, so what they're asking us to do then is to rewrite the function below to work with any case of question text so you get a correct answer in the example. The question really should become for you is, how do we rewrite the function to handle this? Because what we're thinking of intuitively is that the function is just the if statement, but the truth is we can put additional code here. And you know what, the answer really is kind of already given, right? So like what we should really do is basically transport this stuff inside here. So for example, we could just use this syntax, and I'm going to copy paste, right? So I'm trying to be intelligent about this. Because we are feeding in a string, right? And really, what is that string called? It is called question, right? Right, coming in. So we are going to utilize that here. Now, this one doesn't have the label, you know, the parameter label on it. It's just called question. So that's what we're using internally. We lowercase it, we store that here. Now, our function is set up to process question, right? But now we have a different name here. And do we just stick with lower question is kind of the, I'm going to say, yeah, I think that it would make sense. If I'm going to make this equivalent to the question coming in, then it makes sense to change this here. And we just say lower question. And then does it now work? Well, I don't know. You know, here's how you would test it is you could feed in the question. So let's see like how this would respond. So we are sending in hello and hello. Well, is it working? Yeah, it is. Right. Was it working before? We remove this and we can find out. Let's just cut it. And, okay, so now we're getting the generic answer. You guys are seeing that? And now I'm going to put it back. And now you see it changed. So it is working. So let's come up with another question here. So we're not going to like build out what, where, who, all that stuff. We're just testing where, just to kind of make sure that it's working correctly. And we're just going to type in like really broken. Where is the ... Okay. Is it responding correctly? You should say yes.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah, it is, because we don't have a where clause in here. Right? If you wanted to add one, just to test, you could come up here and grab the where. I think you can probably just do that. Move back over to this one, add the where here. Now is it working? No.
Yeah.
Nope.
No, it's not working
You
yet.
have to change this piece, right? So it's got to be checking the right thing. And now it's working. See that? The key here is we are feeding in question and we are lowercasing it. And then we're checking that lowercase version, right? But that's got to stay consistent. There are some other ways to handle this, by the way. Do we, and this is a question you might ask yourself, is this processing of changing something to all lowercase, does it make sense to be in the function? That might be a thing that you ask yourself. I think it does. I think it makes sense for it to be inside the function, because no matter what we feed into it, we want it to be able to respond correctly. So that is the logical way to proceed. Now it says, as well as having general answers to who, what, where questions, you can include some special answers to specific questions if you wish, right? Now, I think it's really interesting because on this page, they're kind of showing us what they thought the solution was to the thing that we just did, right? Which is it a little different? Okay, well, no, all they added was a print statement. They basically followed the same exact approach. You guys noticing that? So we're going to have it lowercase. We're going to print back, where are the cookies? Now you might say, like, why would you do that? Why would you take what they just typed and print it back to the screen? I want you to think about how a text app works. When you type something into the text entry and then you hit send, don't you see it on the feed? So what they're doing here is printing it back to the screen, because that's how a chat works, right? You see both parts of the conversation. So that's why they're doing that. We didn't do that in the previous one. But here they're actually putting in a very specific question. Where are the cookies? And then of course the answer is in the cookie jar. So why is this giving us the wrong answer? Because it's saying to the north.
Because there's two returns for the same question.
Yeah, right. So we do have a distinct question, but the statement before it is terminating the if statement because we're catching the where, and it never reaches the second question. Isn't that interesting? All right, so it says the function above doesn't work if the if statement asks the if question starts with where, which it does. That means the later statements are never tested. Change the function above so you get the answer in the cookie jar to the question, where are the cookie jars? So like, what would be the potential fix to this? Give me a scenario. What can I do to fix this?
Should we rearrange the order in which that those two God, I'm fumbling on my words. Put the if lower question equals where the cookies first, so that way you have that check first, and then it doesn't matter if the
Yeah, and you
so,
see,
so that where yeah, you know, do you know what I'm saying?
yeah, I know exactly what you're saying, and I know,
Sorry, my-
right, it's kind of hard to verbalize it, but you see what
Yeah,
I'm.
it is.
I basically want to put this where this part is, and
Yeah.
that where this part is. But notice I'm using a temporary holding spot down here. So I copied the top statement and moved it down here just so I have a copy of it.
Sure.
Now I'm going to copy this part, right? Replace the top statement. I'm just copy pasting here. And then I'm going to come down here and copy this into this spot. I'm leaving the else in place, so be careful of that, so you don't end up with like two else's, but now they're functionally flipped, right? Then this was just a temporary holding spot, by the way, I'm deleting. And now the code runs and I ask, where are the cookies in the cookie jar? And if I write a second question, like, and I'll put weird capitals in there. Where is Canada? You know, because that one makes sense to the number. Right. All right. Let me know if you guys are good with this step.
Yep.
Good.
I'm still working on it right now.
All right, take your time. All right, back from the break, and hopefully everybody got this typed in and working. And I think, you know, I'm going to kind of reinforce the fact that I think it's really good to manually type some of this in just so you get that feel. And I think that it helps, you know, basically when you're trying to learn the concepts and how the tools work. Let's move on to the next page though. And you'll see on this next page, you know, the topic is default answers. And it says, with the functions you've written so far, if there's no matches of any of the if statements, then a default answer is returned, right? And we saw that in action. In this exercise, you'll make it more interesting by giving a different default answer depending on the length of the question that was asked. So if they ask something more complicated, we'll give them a more complicated response. Now, you can get the length of a string like this. So there is a method that we use called count. And you see how we add it. And this is kind of interesting because I want you to notice that count, because we're using dot notation, since we're not feeding anything into it, it has no parentheses, right? But it still triggers the function to run. And what does count do? Well, it counts the number of characters, right? And the answer to this one is 5. So hello equals 5. Now, you can use that to kind of do a little bit of stuff, you know, to make it kind of interesting. It says, if you want to choose from one of two different default answers, you can also use the remainder operator to get the remainder of the count after dividing by 2. So if it's an odd number of characters, answer one way. If it's an even number of characters, answer a different way, right? If you want to make it feel more random. So they're giving an example. So here's one single letter, but mod 2, you get 1 as the remainder, 0 as the remainder, and then you can write your code to test for that. All right, so this is going to be applied down here. So it says, look at how we're structuring the function here. Same setup, right? We lowercase everything, and then we can ask, where are the cookies in the cookie jar? Any other question with where to the north? And then we have an else. So now so here's where this is going to apply. In the else scenario, so if it's not a who, what, where, how, why, or whatever, we'll let else first count the number of characters in the question. We'll mod it by 2. And then if we have a remainder of 0, we'll say that really depends. If there's a remainder of 1, right, we don't have to test for that, obviously, because it's the only other possibility. We'll say, ask me again tomorrow, right? All right, so like both are non-answers, but they're creative non-answers, if you guys catch what I mean. So now take a look at where are the cookies in the cookie jar? Okay, we got that one. Can I have a cookie? That really depends. And what's the sauce here? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20. So that's even. That really depends. Yep, that's correct. Now that was kind of cumbersome to count it. I could have, by the way, just put a count thing at the end of it and figure that out, by the way, but I didn't do it that way. Here's one that has a remainder of 1, right? So it says, ask me again tomorrow. And now you can tweak these, right? So like if I remove 1 character, it should flip to the other answer. And it does, right? So that's kind of the point. All right, so now they're asking us, instead of using 0 or 1, they want us to come in here and give us 3 alternate answers, right? So instead of modding by 2, we're going to mod by 3, right? So how would we make that change? So, well, the first thing that we would do is we are going to just come up here and change this to a 3. Right, so we're just going to mod by 3 because, basically they told us to, right? All right. But now if we're adding scenarios, we have to actually put in an else if. So here, I'm going to type else if, let's say default number equals 1. Okay, that's one possibility. And then, all right, we're going to keep this one, ask me again tomorrow there, but let's come up with something fresh that really is a non-answer. How about, I'm kind of busy right now. And ask again. You can make it whatever you want it to be, right? Now, what are the 3 possible answers? And they're telling you already down here, it's like the results, instead of just being 0 or 1, it could be 0, 1, or 2. Do I have to code a question for the scenario of 2? And the answer is no, by the way, right? Because if there's only 3 possible answers, we've covered the first 2. The only other possible one would be a 2. So,
yeah.
Right. You see the logic, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I'm just moving this one up. And now these, so I have one that hits ask me again tomorrow, one that hits really depends. And so we need to come up with another question here to test it. So we're going to say response to question. Then I'm going to try to come up with one that comes up with a, what am I looking for? A remainder of 1, right? So, okay. Hey, are you, I'm not sure if this will work out, but firing on all cylinders here and mistyping completely. Hey, are you around? There you go. I'm kind of busy right now. Ask again. All right, you know, that's the question and response might not be ideal, but I think that the scenario is okay. If you guys don't mind here, I'm just gonna pause the recording for a moment.
Yeah, that's fine.
So I think that's kind of neat, and you know what, you can see the layers of complexity being added here, right, to these questions. Now, can you imagine, like, if you're really writing like a program like Siri, for example, like how complicated that has to be? Yeah, right, and to have it actually also respond in a voice, well, that's kind of interesting. The funny thing about that is there are APIs for that. You can actually make that happen, believe it or not. All right, you can see my machine's choking a little bit here. Must be pushing it a little too hard. I'm trying to scroll to the top of the screen and I'm getting the spinning wheel. And I thought this machine had a ton of RAM, but apparently not enough. All right, here I am just waiting. If it sticks with that spinning wheel, I will kill Xcode and restart it, by the way. And right now I'm not very hopeful. All right, I'm gonna do that, folks.
Okay.
Yeah, and you know what? I'm leaving this. Yeah, it is definitely locked up. I'm just gonna try Command Q. Oh. Does anybody remember the force quit?
That is it.
Command Option Q. I believe, or
It was Command Q. I do.
Command Option Escape is the force quit.
Oh, that one.
So I'm gonna force quit. Did I mention before that, you know, when I work with like Microsoft products and Visual Studio, this never happens. Which is so strange, you know, because normally it's the PCs that crash like that, not the Apple products. So sorry, Apple. There goes my free laptop, right?
Yeah, pretty much.
Maybe it's since the new line of Macs are coming out soon, maybe this is a little bit of good old fashioned Apple planned obsolescence.
Yeah, it could be. I have a big old iMac on my desk in the office, and that thing's at least 10 or 11 years old now, but it still works, right? But I just got a notice from Google Chrome that I can't update anymore. So that should be all right. You know, my primary browser, I can't update it. So now what? Oh, I know. Switch to Firefox or Safari, I guess. All right, let's move on then. This next one, it says in this final exercise, you'll combine the things you've learned over the last few pages, update this response function so it gives the answers specified below. It's okay to go back and look at code from other pages. And we're gonna like basically start filling stuff in. So I'm trying to look at like how they're proceeding here. All right, so notice how they're doing this. So they give us the function. So we got to like build this. And when they say you can go back to the earlier pages, that's also known as copy paste, by the way, right? We're gonna copy paste our code in. Right. So it says here that the answers, these answers should be why hello there. Okay, so let's kind of like review everything that we did, because in the function, what's one of the first things we do? We're converting things to lowercase, right? Okay, so let's go back And for me, it's easier to go back and copy it from here rather than from that little text window they have at the bottom there.
Sure.
All right, so I'm just going to do the conversion first. So here it is. All right. Then, I mean, could I just move all of my code and logic over? Okay, here's the answer. Yes, by the way.
Mhm.
Right, let's just do that. Because I'm just thinking about efficiency here. Why would I sit there and retype all this stuff? It makes zero sense to do that. Just grab all of this, and then if we need to adjust it, we will adjust it. But for now, we have a good starting point, so why not use it? So there's all of our logic from before. Now they have a lot of extra spaces in here, and you know what? There's kind of like this whole kind of etiquette, I think, like when you are writing code, like how much white space are you leaving? How condensed do you make things? You know, where do you put your curly brackets and all that? I tend to be in the habit of trying to make things as concise as possible. And I don't know if you guys use that approach or not. But I will agree, like, you know, the author, whoever did this, is doing a lot of this kind of stuff where they're separating stuff out so it's easier to read. But I'm not sure I'm necessarily a fan, at least in this scenario. All right. So now I am noticing, all right, that there's this the question mark thing here. Can we get rid of that? I'm going to say yes. I'm just blowing it away. Now let's take a look really quick to see if it's answering in the way we want it to answer. And it says, these answers should be why, hello there. But I'm putting in hello there, and it's giving me, ask me again tomorrow. What's missing?
It was back to our what was it, page 2 on
Okay.
the question dot has prefix hello. The return why hello there.
Right. So I'm going back, and I'm actually going to the third tab,
Okay.
page 3, because it's there, basically. And I'm just going to copy it, and then I'm going to come back to the current tab. And let's get that up at the top here of our function. So let's just put that right at the top. I'm just going to add a line, paste it in. Now, of course, that kind of tends to break the next statement, right? So if I put in my closing curly bracket and then type else, and then move this over like so. There we go. So are we getting the right answers now? Yes. Right? Both with upper and lowercase, it is working. So I'll just leave that on the screen. So
Okay.
what I did is I added this at the top, and the one that was at the top, I just moved it down and added an else. That's the functional difference. Right. Hopefully that's good. All right, so the next two should respond, where should I go on holiday, and where can I find the North Pole? And it says to the north, we're good, right? We already have that logic. All right, so it's working. Do we still have our cookie jar question? Where are the cookies? Yes, because we have that first before the other where question that is still processing in the cookie jar. So we're okay there as well. So would seem like it would be a lot of work, really isn't, right?
Yeah.
Because we were intelligent about it. With any other question, you can also make new rules or conditions so different questions have different answers. Below are some sample questions for you to test the final part. And you notice how they set up a scenario where both the 0, 1, and 2 are all being tested. All 3 of them are hitting. So I get ask me again tomorrow. I'm kind of busy right now. Ask again, or that really depends. Okay, so it is working, right? Is yours all working too?
Yep.
Excellent. All right. And then they tell us, hey, you can copy paste. Okay, thank you for telling us after we've already done it. Right. All right. Now we're on the wrap up. And basically, here's the fun part. Now we're going to switch over to Xcode proper. We have our code already written, and we are going to insert that code ultimately into Xcode proper. So here's what you can do with that code, by the way. You can either just leave the playground open so you can come in there and copy paste it. Or you can you could save it off to a file, you could put it in a different text editor, whatever you want to do. I'm just going to leave mine open, right? So I see no reason to change from that. Now, here comes the next piece, and I am going to pause the recording for this. All right, now that we're moving on to the next thing, so we just finished the playground for the question bot, and we're going to move into the regular app build. But just to show you guys where I'm at, I'm working off of the teacher edition of the book, and I'm following the instructions in section 2.3. And once again, this is a teacher version, so there's a little extra stuff here. But if you're working on your own at home on this or watching the video, which some people will in the aftermath, this is where you find your step-by-step instructions, right? And it is suggested that you follow these so that the app builds correctly. I am moving this to my other screen. So if I do happen to I'm looking at something important here and I need page numbers or something like that, I will mention what those are. But that's where I'm starting. In the teacher edition, I'm on page 243. I'm not sure what that would equate to in the regular edition of the book. Well, we'll find out in just a moment, I guess. All right. So let's first start by opening up the project in Finder. So in the same spot where you had the playground, so under section 3 here, so algorithms, so we're in section 2.3, and then the question bot. And then you'll notice here that we have all this stuff, but what we're really interested in is the project file. So just go ahead and double click that project file, do a trust and open, and that will open up inside of Xcode. All right. The other thing I'm going to do is I'm not going to go full screen on this, but really, really close, just so I have the maximum amount of workspace. And this is kind of a preference thing, by the way. Like whenever I'm typically working in an IDE, I do like it to be as much screen real estate as I can occupy, so I don't necessarily have to switch windows. It is important to note, and I'll reiterate this, when you work with Xcode, it is possible to take some of these panels and stuff and tear them off and put them on other screens. So if you have multiple screens, you can kind of do that. All right. Now, first thing they ask us to do, by the way, is to take this app that's kind of pre-built. And you know what, as I launch this, do you notice that, oh, well, my screen's blank. This must be broken or something. That's like the first inclination that you have, and it's not. What you want to do is you want to start looking at basically what the app looks like. And you notice nothing over here in the side, right? So this panel here, the navigator panel, and the sub panel is the project navigator. Nothing is selected, so that's why we see nothing on the screen, right? So that shouldn't be too much of a mystery. What we will do is we will focus on mostly putting our code in this area. So you notice as I click on a question answerer in the left sidebar, it does bring up like a blank code page. Now, it does deal with this thing called a struct, which we haven't learned about yet, but we will use a lot of those in coding in Swift. But this is basically where our code's gonna be entered. Now, interestingly, before we're supposed to do this, by the way, you will notice that if you go to the main storyboard, right? So here's what it looks like. They have already done some work for us, right? So they've created the interface and a box where we can type stuff in, and a button to press, and a little graphic and a thing, right? So they've kind of started us off. And the first thing that we really should do here is what we call the clean build, right? So we're actually going to run this, right? Even though none of the code's been added yet. And just to kind of refresh as to why we do this, we do this basically because that way it gives us the knowledge that whatever we do have here existing already works, right? And then it does pre-compile some of the code so that it's ready for the changes that we're about to make. So it doesn't, next time we do a build, it might not be as intensive for it to relaunch the simulator, right? So you notice like I managed to talk there for a few minutes, basically, before the simulator popped up. And it wasn't a few minutes, it was more like 20 seconds, but it kind of felt like forever, right? And so one of the other reasons you do the clean build is to speed up that process. The simulator's on deck and ready to roll. Some of the code's pre-compiled. And so notice it looks just like it would on your phone, right? And yeah, they're showing that you can do the swipe and everything just like an iPhone would tell you. But right now, if I type in some stuff, and you can actually use your keyboard. So if I say hello, and then I hit ask, okay, it does nothing. Yeah. Now you guys will notice, right? So I'm gonna stop the simulator from running. So you can do this a couple different ways. One recommended way to do this, and I've now lost my mouse pointer. There it is. I'm going to stop the simulator, but notice that doesn't stop the code from running, right? Stopping the simulator. But if I hit the stop button here, then it will actually stop eventually. There, now it's stopped. Now this is kind of a weird little effect too. Do you notice that when I stopped it, now I'm like, they put me in some area and it says up at the top, app delegate and yada, 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 yada. Like, I don't know what this stuff is, right? And here's the answer to this. Don't mess with this stuff, generally speaking. This is pre-configured to let our stuff run. But I'm gonna go back to the navigator panel here and then go back to question answerer. And if you're wondering why it returned a question mark, here's why. It's set up right now to already receive our question and put that in response, but every time you type something in, it's just gonna be a question mark. Right? Why? Because it's telling it to do that. Yeah, it's pre-configured. Now, some of the stuff here is really kind of a matter of, as you're looking at it, figuring out the interface maybe as much as like typing the code in and making it do something magical. And I think that's a pretty important takeaway. All right, so once again, just so we're clear here, the main storyboard shows what the app looks like. Okay, great. And that's working just fine. We didn't have to create that. This is the spot where we're going to enter our code. But if you're curious, there are also these other files here. For right now, we're not messing with what we call the view controller, but in later app builds, we will be doing a lot of work in this area. And the view controller is, I think of it as kind of like the conductor for an orchestra. This is the part of the app that really tells the app, all right, what am I doing? Well, you do that. That's what the controller basically is in an app. However, and you'll notice here that we're not generally going to mess with this code, at least not yet. Most of what we're going to do is going to be in this space here. All right. Now, this interesting little part of this is we are going to add our response stuff here. And you notice how they have this little to-do marker. And you notice they're spelling it wrong. Did you guys pick up on that part? It's like, why isn't it like to space do? Now, one of the defaults is when you are doing app builds in this environment, they're leaving little notations basically, so you know that this is a thing to do. So like you can actually search for that phrase, but it actually does have kind of a special meaning, aside from the fact that it's a comment, but just the format in which they're doing it is just an indicator to you that they're expecting you to type in code here. This is not an unusual thing to see. Let's start with something really simple. and the simple thing that they're suggesting that we do is instead of just like you type in a question and it just throws back a question mark,
Mhm.
not good. Why don't we just change this for right now? And their recommendation is, I'm sorry, I don't understand the question. I don't understand the question. So there's my changed response. And you know what? Let's go ahead and run this again. So I'm just going to hit the run button. Thought I hit the run button, right? There we go. Now it's running. The build succeeded. The simulator should launch a whole lot faster this time. And there it is. Now let's just type in like, question like, where is McDonald's? And hit ask. And now we see that our response, so instead of getting the question mark, now we see the full response, right? So I have a little bit of experience tweaking it, right? So now it should give you kind of the encouragement here, I would think, that, oh, can we just drop all our logic directly in? And that would be the hope, right? All right, let's go ahead and stop the process from running. So I'm coming back to Xcode and I'm hitting stop, right? And part of the process of like what we're doing right now is the fact that we're not only like getting apps to work, we're learning processes and procedures for how to work with the tools and make magic happen. And they have this little tip here in part 2 that says there's kind of this little thing that's really kind of cool. If you're working in Xcode, and I think you guys have already figured out, like you click on the one curly brace, and then as you click on the one, the other part of it highlights in yellow so you can see which one is the matching one. Really helpful, by the way. But the other tip that they're pointing out here is when you have one curly bracket and you double click it, it highlights the whole block of code that goes with it. That's a helpful little tip. That's not true in a lot of IDEs, but that is really a nice little feature here. All right, now let's jump back over to the playground. Right, so there was a reason we left that thing open. You can come over here and maybe go directly to the question answer playground. And then we want to go back a tab, right, to the spot where we have all our code. And I'm looking at the instructions here and select the entire function body, then copy the text. All right, so now they're saying the entire function body, and here's me being like geek once again, and I'm going back to Xcode, but I'm going to the proper window. And notice what they're trying to say is we're replacing this part of it, not the opening, right? Just that part of it. So in the playground, then, can I kind of do the same thing? And the answer is yes. Can I find that curly bracket, double click it, and get the whole block of code? So there it is, right? So there's an example. Command C to copy. Back over to Xcode. And now we're just, with this highlighted, now, mind you, right? We're just going to paste in our code. Now, if you didn't do a clean paste, let's say you missed a curly bracket or something, the compiler did kick in and give me the error message. So just be mindful of that. The one reason, oops, and of course I typed in the wrong one. One reason I did the double click thing is to show you that, be consistent on both ends. So if like you're replacing a whole block, select the whole block from the same relative position. All right, I assume you guys are okay at this point, right?
Yep.
All right. Now, you know what, we're ready to run the app already, right? So you can see like we could have done this coding here, but then we wouldn't have all the examples and prompts and stuff. So this is why we did it externally and brought it in. And I'm going to reinforce the fact, and they say so in the teacher's guide too, that it is really common in programming companies, especially if they're large and working collectively with teams of people, that we do separate out the concerns. So somebody might be exactly tasked with, all right, you come up with all the question logic, I'll build the interface, you know, you can build the data part of it. And, you know, somebody else will propagate it, publish it, you know, everybody has different roles. So not unusual to combine work from different people that way. All right, let's go ahead and be brave and run this now. So I'm gonna hit the run button again. And now, when we run this, it should respond in the same way it was in the playground, right? So let's test some of the scenarios. So let's just say, hello. Hey, it worked, right? How about a capital H, hello? The capital O at the end. Okay, same one, couldn't really tell, right? All right, the standard, where are the cookies? In the cookie jar, duh. Right? Or where is Pizza Hut? To the north. Try all the questions. Why am I here? Ask me again tomorrow. That doesn't seem like the right response. Oh, we don't have the right code, do we?
Yeah, I was starting to see that as well on my end.
Yeah, we only have part of the right code. All right, so here's what we're gonna do. We're gonna stop running, and now we're gonna get all the other logic, because really what we're missing is all the other questions, right? Like we got the hello, where are the cookies, to the north, and then we got all these alternate answers, but we don't have all the other in between ones. So let's go back to the playground. So here I am going back to the playground, and I'm going to go back a few tabs now, right? And I don't know how far back we have to
It's
go.
on page 2.
Okay, is it page 2? Where
Yeah.
we have all of them answered? All right. And so I think we really want everything from like here to up through the else. Right. Now, be mindful of like where you're copying from, because see, I'm trying to get the statement in there too. So I'm grabbing the statement, and then I am grabbing that closing curly bracket, but maybe that's not smart. Maybe I should just grab this. You guys seeing that? Right.
Mhm.
This is strategery here, basically. So I'm going to copy. Let's go back over to Xcode proper here. And then that's going to paste in. Boy, so I should have grabbed that curly bracket. So I have to add a curly bracket and then paste. And then I'm checking to make sure I'm not throwing any errors here, but I think it's okay. So I'd have hello, where are the cookies, where, who, what, why, how, and then the other one at the bottom, which is to divide by 3, look for the remainder, and give you one of 3 possible answers. Looks pretty good. Let's run this version and see if that works.
So don't we gotta change those the questions to lower question?
Lower. Oh yeah, good catch. Right. Notice I didn't stop me. And you know, the smart play here really is to, once again, copy paste, and actually we could probably talk about find and replace at this point, but maybe that's a little too deep for right now. All right, but you can see I replaced all those. Good catch, Jonathan.
Mhm.
All right, now we're going to run it. Build. All right, so now let's try all these scenarios. And I think it's kind of neat is to run the simulator here and have the code in the background, and we can kind of use it as a script. So let's try hello, lowercase hello. Let's do our where are the cookies? Yeah, very good. Where is I don't know, Burger King in the north? Who is in charge? Maybe a Gateway student. What is your problem? A 3-year-old hopped up on sugar. Right, John? Keep them away from the sugar. All right.
Right.
Good luck. Let's do a why. Why is this so cool? You are so darn cool. There you go. I did plan that one. How does it all work? Very carefully and step by step, right? And then let's ask one that doesn't fit any of those. Can I leave now? Right, one of my favorite questions from students. I'm kind of busy right now. Ask again. You know, can you? Of course, that's the same count. Can you? Question mark. Ask again tomorrow. Try it again. Can you, Miss Kenyo? How about that? So all the scenarios hit, right? So everything that I throw at this is working the way that I'm anticipating. Pretty cool. Now, I think I did mention last week, and this is kind of funny, but when I was doing my training this past summer, and it was a refresher on this, one of the people in the training, he was a younger guy, got really smart and took he apparently uses the paid version of ChatGPT, and he basically used his API key for ChatGPT, dropped it into the chat bot, and actually had this app talk directly to ChatGPT. So you're getting like AI generated answers. That sounds like magic, by the way, but it's totally possible.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah, it is. So it does require that you have a paid account, though, right? So you can't use it in app building, but kind of interesting that you could kind of even hypothetically even do that. So you could, if you have a paid AI account, you could spin up your own little app on your phone and bypass like using a browser or whatever to make it happen. So I think that's really kind of cool. There are some things, by the way, that you should know, right? You guys all know the undo key, right? Like command is undo. All right. Did any of you come up with answers that were wrong?
As in errors? No.
Good. All right. If and I don't think any of us had any issues with the app build, and I'm just looking at all the different scenarios here. There is a whole list of troubleshooting errors on page 250 in the teacher edition that spill over onto page 251, by the way. All right, now we're going to go back in and we're going to like work with the interface a little bit. So this is part 4 in the book, and it is marked as optional, but you know what, I figure we should do it, right? Let's you know, learn everything we possibly can. Why the heck not? All right, so in part 4, what we're going to do here is we are going to go back, stop the app from running. So let's stop the execution here. We are going to go to the main storyboard. So now we're going into like the visual mode. And then you'll notice as I bring, you know, the storyboard up, that there's this like panel here on the side with the view controller scene. And I'm going to expand that little aspect here. And then what we're looking for is to select the view that's inside the view controller. All right. Now you can expand this. Like if you're curious what's underneath there, you just go, you know, basically and look. And really what's going on here is if you expand out all these little arrows, they show you all the little components of everything that went on the screen here in a hierarchy from the container down into the actual object. Now, you know, Jonathan, you're a web guy, so you're getting to the point now where, like in class, we're starting to talk about this stuff where we have, you know, code structures, and then we put stuff inside of them, and then we put other things inside of those. And some people are like, well, why'd you put a div inside a div and a paragraph inside of that? And
Mhm.
it's this concept of encapsulation, because when you put stuff inside other things, then you can control them simultaneously. And that's exactly what happens here in the view. They want us to select the entire view, and then we are just going to come over here to the side, and we're just going to go right to the background. And let's choose a different color for the background. So right now it's gray, and you can choose one of the default colors so you can see there's, whatever. Or if you want, you can go to the custom panel and you can, custom mix your own type of color here. So whatever your situation is in terms of like what looks good to you, go for it. I'm also going to drop my opacity down. Maybe that purple is, oh yeah, that's not so great. Maybe we'll go back over on this side. And this is one of those experiment things, really. So just, that's kind of lavendery, whatever. I'm just going to go with that. Close the panel. So that was one of our big takeaways there, is changing the background color. This is something that we've done before, right? So like not a big deal, right? And it shouldn't be intimidating at this point. The fascinating aspect that comes next is we also have a graphic up on the screen, and notice that it is the little like robot head, right? And so I can come up here and I can actually click on that area, and I'm trying to click on the robot head, but you notice how I'm not like exactly getting to it. And this is kind of interesting. The robot head is actually placed in here as a label. So this is really an emoji that's oversized, is what this is. So when we look over here on the sidebar to find that object, you'll notice that we have the stack view. There's another stack view inside of it. We don't even know what these things mean yet, but just, roll with it, right? We're going to expand that. And then inside here, notice how there's a little L that stands for label, which typically when we're doing an app build, a label is just a container that holds text. That's it, right? Now, it does so happen that we can put emojis in as text. So we learned that like weird thing about Apple devices too, right? Because emojis basically are text. And so when I click specifically, on the little robot head here, and you can see it highlights, and now we have actual control over it. Now, this is kind of fascinating because it says here, using the text attribute in the inspector, change the emoji to a different character. All right. So I have it highlighted. Where is the text? Well, that's over here on the right side. Remember, this panel is called the inspector panel, and we are in the attributes inspector. If I was on a Microsoft platform, I would call it the properties panel, right? Same difference, right? But here's the actual text right here, right? So we're going to actually backspace, and then we're going to hit Control Command Space, or I think these days you can just hit the function key.
Yep.
Yep. So on the modern Macs, you just hit the function key. On an older Mac, Control Command Space, whatever. And maybe like if you were on a desktop, this would be irrelevant. You would have to use the other one. But now we want to find some other, thing to show. And so like, be creative, find something that like, find what do you want your chat bot to look like? That's on you. Maybe mine's going to be a dinosaur. All right. Once I had that typed in, and at the moment I get out of that box, I'm going to hit tab to get out. Emoji has changed. And yes, normally the emoji is much smaller. We've just made it really big. Why not? Right. So there's your change of character. Right. All right. So that was the one change. Now I'm on to page 254 in the teacher edition. So we want to actually change. The other thing here is there's some text up on the screen that says, "Hello, human. I'm QuestionBot. ask me a question, right? So what we'll want to do for that one, right? Like I could click over here and notice I found that, and then notice there are, subparts of this too. There's some constraints on this to control the size, but we are in the response label. And once again, the text window for that is over here, right? Now I put a dinosaur on there, right? So we can change, basically you can put in your own messages. Like, hello. How about this? I'm Robosaur. Robosaur bot. I don't know. I'm trying to come up with it. All right. Robosaur bot. No, that's not that. I think the A and the U have to be switched around.
Or Dinobot.
What was that?
Or you could just call it Dinobot.
You know what? That's better. I like it. It's more concise, simple from my remaining brain power to process. Dinobot. Nice. Okay, so I'm Dinobot. I'm here to answer your and I'm going to hit tab to leave that. Now you'll see it is updated. All right. So could you change font size? Could you change
Yes.
font? Yeah, all that stuff is available here, right? So if you're so inclined, go for it, whatever. It doesn't matter too much, frankly. The point is to know where to change these things, and we're taking something that's pre-built, we're tweaking it a little bit and making it our own, right? So here goes. Let's try to run this again. So I'm going to come back up top here and hit the run. It's our build. Here it is propagated. It's not a very friendly chat bot, right? All right, but you can just now you could also write any logic you want. So like if you wanted to really play with this and make it something weird or whatever, you can go in there and change the logic on the code to your heart's content, and even set it up for very specific scenarios for people to ask questions. It's not really very complicated code. Now, that's pretty much the build, right? So here's what I would like you guys to do in terms of capturing this to submit it to earn your points. I would prefer that you click on the question answerer tab so your code comes up on the screen like this, and then the simulator forward. So if you could get both of those things on the screen at the same time, and then just go ahead and do a screenshot of that. And of course, my screenshot is way over here. And then really, you don't even need to screenshot the whole thing. Something like that would probably be adequate. So there it is captured. And then of course, I can click on this and it's in my screenshot tool, and then you can save it, copy it, whatever. And then what I would like you to think about as you're submitting this, and you might even think about answering these couple of questions because they're asked in the book. It says for the app you're thinking of, like if you're thinking of building your own app, what's an example of input the brain would take? I'm not sure. What's an example of a result it would return to display in the user interface? Well, that kind of depends too, right? This is very simplistic, but when you talk about app building, these are the kind of things you think about. Sometimes you think first about how the interface will look and behave and what kind of stuff might happen before you actually write the code. And then that helps you write the code. Like if you have no vision, right, it's really kind of hard to build an app. One of the biggest challenges to app building, like if you guys have like that kind of aspiration, because this can be something that you can do and can be successful at. The hardest part is coming up with the idea for an app and go, oh, I got a great idea for an app. And this has happened to me many times. And one really great example is I have an app on my phone here that is a speedometer app because I have an old classic vehicle whose speedometer cable broke a long time ago. And the last thing I was going to do is, try to fix it because it's really old and hard to get parts. So I'm like, I'm going to check and see if there's a speedometer app. And if there's not, I'm going to code one. And then I go to the, and this is on the Android Play Store or whatever. And there are like 500 of them, right? Because the code must be pretty easy for it. But I just found one that looked cool. And so that's the hard part, is coming up with the idea. It doesn't mean that you couldn't recode it and make it better. So then I ended up spending my time looking at all the different ones and trying them. This doesn't work, this doesn't work. Then I found one that was really cool. It not only was a speedometer, but it tracked my miles. It was also a compass, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And it also allowed you to flip the display so I could put it on my dashboard. So at night it would reflect off the window and I would have a heads up display. So my speed, here I'm driving this vintage vehicle and I have this digital display up in front of me with all this data. Really cool, right? But it was really helpful mostly because the gas gauge also doesn't work on the vehicle. So every time I would fill up, right, I would basically track my miles and I would only drive so many miles so I'd make sure I would never run out of gas. And it's a horrible thing to do, right? All right. But that's I think a really big takeaway, right? So if you're thinking about creating something, the idea is often the most challenging part. Let's do another break, you guys. I'm going to stop this recording here. So that was building the.
Oh, I think video crashed. Oh, never mind. There we go.
Okay. So I'm going to stop this recording. We are going to do another 5. And in fact, let's make this break a little bit longer. Let's make it a 10-minute break. We'll come back at 3.
Okay.
Good.